when we're talking about how to post on social media and what to post on social media and why it's important is that people want to do business with people that they like.
Welcome, everyone, to the Closing Table Podcast, real accounts from real estate professionals from across the country, brought to you by WindowStill. I'm your host, Kat Schooler, and today I am sitting down with the Millennial real estate agent, Alicia Arritt. Alicia is with the Morgan Womble Group out in Raleigh, North Carolina. She is also the listing manager and marketing manager for her group. And Alicia and I talk about how she decided to brand herself as the Millennial real estate agent. We do a deep dive into social media, and I get Alicia's opinion about cross-posting. It might surprise you. And then we end with a talk about goals and knowing your why behind wanting to complete a certain number of transactions. It is a beautiful conversation. It ends on such a heartwarming note. I can't wait for you all to listen, so let's jump right in. Alicia, thank you so much for joining me today. How you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
So I love your branding. You are the Millennial real estate agent. Will you tell us how you got into real estate and how you decided to brand yourself this way?
Getting into real estate, I think my story is kind of a lot like a lot of real estate agents. I actually went to college for journalism. I wanted to be a writer. When I got out of school, it just kind of happened to be when a lot of newspapers and magazines were doing massive layoffs. So there really weren't a lot of jobs. I ended up working in hospitality, food and beverage for years. I was a server, a bartender, a manager, and I enjoyed it, but it wasn't really what I wanted to do long term. Working in service industry, I had so many people that were like, you would be a great real estate agent. You should go into that. So eventually, when my husband and I moved back to the Raleigh area and I started exploring options, I was like, well, might as well. So I took classes. I actually started classes in January of 2020. So I ended up not finishing classes until that summer because, of course, they got temporarily paused, and I didn't end up getting my license until the end of that year. And at first, I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. I ended up coming up with the Millennial Real Estate Agent brand the year after that because I was going through a course with the real estate agency that I was with at the time that was to kind of coach newer agents. And they were talking so much about branding yourself and coming up with a brand and something that's kind of unique to you. And for some reason, I just kind of thought of the Millennial Real Estate Agent because I am very, very much a millennial. And I looked, and nobody else was using it on social media,
I love it.
so I took it.
You very much are. You have a dog, right? You might even like avocado toast, right?
Yep,
That's Millennial
I
right
love
there.
avocado
Spot
toast.
on. I love it. That's so
Through
cool.
and through.
And I love it because as much as millennials get a lot of flack for the avocado toast and expensive coffee I think is something that's really exciting about, millennials and especially because millennials are now the age of home buying, I think it's great to hopefully to find people your age as clients.
There is. Millennials do currently make up the largest portion of the home buying age generation. It's something like 40 something percent at this point. And we are also the largest percentage of generations that exists at the moment. So there are obviously a lot of millennials that are entering the home buying market and they're looking into being a first time home buyer. And I think it does resonate with them to have someone that gets where they're coming from a financial status, from a generational status, that can help coach them through this really daunting
Certainly,
process.
especially because it's so much of, at least, in some of the social media that I consume, it can it can feel very heavy as, someone who's a millennial to try and purchase a house. And there's kind of a lot of negative press about that. And so to have someone like you out there being like, no, you can do this. I'm a millennial, and I can show you the way is really positive.
Yeah, absolutely. There is every single day I see videos talking about millennials are never going to be able to buy a home. They're never going to be able to afford it. The housing market is too expensive. And, in a lot of ways, obviously, it is a lot more challenging for our generation than it was for our parents and our grandparents. but it is not impossible. And there's definitely a lot of information out there that I think can be useful to millennials to start the home buying process, but that they've just never had
Certainly.
introduced to
I
them.
think I mean, it wasn't necessarily something talked to me. You know, I'm a millennial. It wasn't talked about to me like when I was in college, and or even younger. You know, like how do you navigate real estate? And I think the conversations are changing for hopefully for younger generations about how to navigate these finances and real estate and possibly even like real estate investing.
Yeah, and I think that's so important to me. I love, every real estate agent has their ideal client. I really, really love working with first time home buyers. It's just so much fun for me to go into that educational process. Because not all real estate agents are going to do it or are necessarily great at making sure that they hit that aspect of it. I know when my husband and I bought our very first home, we were early to mid 20s. And when we finished that process, I wasn't a real estate agent yet. I could not have told you anything about what happened during that process. Had no idea what was going on most of the time. We just listened to what the real estate agent told us to. And he did an amazing job. We ended up using him several years later when we sold that house because he was great at it. But I had no idea what went into the process at that point until several years after that when I started learning about real estate myself from a professional standpoint. So I think it's so important to make sure, when you have these people signing document after document after document and 20-page contracts, what it all really means and what it means for their future.
Certainly. And you're not just doing that, you know, with the clients you're working with. You're on social media a lot. You know, especially your TikTok is a wealth of information. So you're out there, you know, educating the masses as well. And I guess kind of what is it, would you say it's the same kind of idea that drove you to do that, to create all these TikToks? You know, they're informational, they're fun, they're totally watchable.
Well, I had started getting into social media before I became a real estate agent. I also have a very, very small little fashion and lifestyle brand that I do. So that kind of marketing was just so familiar with me. So when I started in real estate and we were talking about different ways to market yourself and ways to do lead generation, that was just one that I was able to latch onto because it was comforting and it was familiar. Door knocking, cold calling, those kinds of things, definitely not as comfortable, not as familiar. And I really leaned into social media and TikTok and Instagram, and that's where I was finding my audience. That's where I was getting responses from people that were asking questions and they wanted to know this information and they were interested in it. So it just kind of went from there.
Yeah, you hear like Gen Zers, you know, now if we go step down one generation or step younger or whatever you want to say, they learn everything off of TikTok. You know, like I don't know about you, but I search YouTube and that makes me old.
I was
Um,
going to say, we're the YouTube generation.
I know. It's like our parents like read the manual. We go to YouTube and Gen Z goes to TikTok. It's an evolution. But I think it's so smart to then use that platform to help educate and you know, some content's going to be evergreen, some's going to be like market specific, and I think you do a really good job of hitting both sides of that.
Thank you.
Speaking of something that is kind of more like specific, you know, we've had the NAR settlement has kind of like happened and it's going into effect soon. And I'm sure now that the market's picking up for the summer, people probably home buyers are probably wondering how this affects them. And you made a really great video kind of explaining how this affects buyers. If you would mind sharing with us how this is all rolling out.
Yeah, not a problem. So I am in North Carolina. We were very fortunate with all of this coming about that we're kind of, as I've said in some of my videos, we're ahead of the eight ball because one of the big changes that's going to be happening is that buyers and their buyer agents will have to have a contract in place between them in order for the agent to show them the home and write them an offer. We've been using buyer agency agreements in North Carolina for much longer than I've been in this field. So we're already familiar with how to do that. It does already disclose buyer agency compensation. So it's kind of a conversation we're already used to having. The only thing that we will really have to get used to is when we have to have that agreement in place. Previously, for North Carolina rules, we just had to have it in place before we could write an offer for a client. Whereas now it's going to have to be in place before we can show a home to a client, at least once all these rules take effect. The other major change is obviously that our MLS system or any system that is associated with the National Association of Realtors will not be able to disclose that field that says how much they're going to be sharing with the buyer's agent for compensation, which I think is where a lot of the fear has been coming from because a lot of news headlines kind of ran with that and started saying that there wasn't going to be any buyer agency compensation, which so far that's not what we're seeing. We're not expecting to see that become a huge issue. It just means that we as agents are going to be doing a little more research to make sure that we know what we're getting into and we can educate our clients on it going into it, just to make sure, if for some reason that they aren't going to be offering that buyer agency compensation, or if they're going to be offering a much lower buyer agency compensation, we can have that conversation with our buyers before we go into the home so that we know what to expect, and decide how they want to approach it.
That's awesome. And that makes a lot of sense. So thank you for explaining that. I'm sure, yes, a lot of people have seen the headlines and just kind of gotten a little scared. And especially, I think there is a lot of, I don't know, it's the 24-hour news cycle, right? I think they're just, it's, that's, it's all fear based. But, between like interest rates and this happening and stuff like that, I think people might feel like there are a lot of obstacles. And I don't know. It seems very simple when you explain it like that.
It won't be simple. It's going to be a learning period for all of us because we're going to have these changes and we haven't, as an industry, spelled out quite yet exactly how we're going to approach this going forward. I've heard different agencies say that they're going to have third-party websites that are not associated with their MLS where they can display that information. I've heard people talk about having it as part of the offer contract process. And other people that are just, old school and they're like, well, we're just going to have to call each other and talk and figure it out. So we don't know exactly what the new norm is going to be, which is going to cause some growing pains. But again, we're not really expecting to run into this plethora of sellers that just refuse to do the buyer agency compensation split, simply because if they do that, hopefully their listing agent is educating them on how that's going to affect their position in the buying market and how that's going to really reduce the pool of buyers that's available to them.
That's a good point, right? I'm sure people don't think about it that way, but like if you're working with an agent already, you're trying to get the most money from your home versus like doing a for sale by owner, right? Because you hear time and time and again that for sale by owner doesn't always go well. I don't want to
Yeah, it doesn't always make you more money.
yeah. It doesn't make you the more money you're hoping for always. So I think that's a great other point to consider is that agents should be educating their sellers as well as to why it is important.
Mhm. Yeah, you don't want to narrow down because obviously buyers, especially first time buyers going into the market, they're going to be nervous to begin with because of the market we're in. And they're especially going to be nervous if they end up in a situation where they feel like they can't have their own representation because who's going to pay their representation if it's not being paid from the commission split like we've been doing for years and years.
Totally. And the other thing too, I think life changes all the time, not just like a specific industry, not just like real estate. When you were saying there's going to be some growing pains with it, something came to mind is like, well, 20 years ago, there wasn't Zillow, there wasn't online
Oh,
anything. And I'm sure there was a time when that was scary for everyone to go online, and it's only helped, right? So while this might be a little sticky for a while, it will sort itself out.
yeah. We have to pivot. We'll figure it all out. And you're right, the industry is constantly changing. We didn't even have buyer agency wasn't a thing until the early 90s. So prior to then, buyers had no representation. They had nobody in their corner teaching them things and educating them on this process and looking out for their best interests. And I don't foresee us going back to that kind of a time period where buyers don't have that representation because just the world we live in today, our society, everybody wants someone looking out for them. They want to make sure they're not going to get taken advantage of.
Oh, certainly. I kind of briefly mentioned this on another episode that will come out before this one, but I went in, I looked at a house with my husband that was being sold by a family friend, just a for sale by owner, and for a brief second we were entertaining the idea, but I just kept thinking like it would be nice to have a person in between us, right?
Mhm.
Like we know each other too well. And this is a big financial transaction, and it would have just been nice, even though it didn't end up happening, even though your emotions get really high like really quickly, and you're trying to navigate a very personal relationship with a financial transaction, and I'm like, this is why real estate agents are the best.
Yeah, and that happens. I mean, we've had transactions before where we've listed a home for someone, and the person who buys it ends up being someone that they knew ahead of time. And it's just easier for everyone involved to have that little bit of a wall between you, separating you, because it can get very personal, very heightened very quickly. Real estate is an emotional transaction for buyers and sellers. So you need a little bit of that third party, or third and fourth party if you have both agents, to kind of be the go between.
For sure. Speaking of like clients, these are my favorite questions to ask agents. Do you have any memorable client stories you'd like to share?
I have so many. I feel like all my clients have been memorable in some way or the other. Um, I think my two favorite stories are really the very, very first transaction I had was a couple that found me on Instagram from what I was posting there, all of my education videos. And they were moving to Raleigh, or moving to the Triangle area from the clear other side of the country. They were never going to be able to make the trip here to physically see houses. So we had to do everything through FaceTime. All of their
Mm.
tours, all of the calls, going through all of the contracts. It was all through video and phone call. I was going in with my phone and touring them through these houses. It was at kind of the height of the pandemic. So I was having to run out and go tour these homes as soon as they hit the market, because homes were flying off the shelves pretty much. And then they ended up going on vacation to Europe. And a home that was in a neighborhood they had been really interested in came on the market. I emailed them about it. They wanted to look at it. So I had to go record a video walkthrough and email it to them so that they could view it when they were able to get internet connection. They decided they did want to put in an offer, but we had an offer deadline on Mother's Day.
Mm.
And I had about a 3 hour lead time from when the agent told me that they were doing an offer deadline and when I was going to have documents in, with very little way to actually contact my clients. So I was texting, emailing, calling. I was Googling, how do you contact someone who's international, who doesn't have Wi Fi signal? Just trying to get in touch with them. I did manage to get in touch with them because they just so happened to be at the train station. So we were able to get the contracts together and got it in under the deadline by maybe 5 minutes. And they went under contract, and now they happily live in that home.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was my baptism by fire transaction.
Yeah, because I'm sure there was big time difference too, the whole thing.
Hmm. Yeah, it was a huge, huge undertaking. I think I wrote one contract for them prior to this, and I ended up writing that contract at 2 o'clock in the morning because of the time difference between us.
Oh
Um,
boy.
which was it was an undertaking. It was a challenge, but it was also a really good learning option.
And like, maybe like I don't say like life should be paused, but maybe like lesson learned if you're on the house search, like maybe don't go on vacation. Or maybe that's the only way this house came on the market, right?
Yeah, it was a fun transaction. It was one that I am definitely never going to forget.
That's too great. That's so fun. Speaking of kind of like your evolution, trial by fire, if you were to start over in real estate today, what would you be doing differently?
If I was starting over today, I would have joined a team earlier. Teams aren't for everybody, but it was definitely a really, really good move for me. I was with the first real estate firm I joined for almost a year, no transactions, had no idea what I was doing, did not know how to find clients, didn't know what to do once I found clients. And we had a coaching program, but I wasn't really getting a lot out of it. So I was very, very close to not renewing my license and just kind of walking away from real estate altogether. When the real estate team that I'm with reached out to me, I had coffee with one of the members. They offered for me to join the team where I would have actual hands on coaching, and it made a world of difference. So if I was starting over, I would definitely have joined a team immediately instead of wasting that first year just kind of floating along with no idea what I was doing. And I definitely would have jumped into social media a little bit earlier. I was probably 6 or 7 months into real estate before I really started posting videos from a real estate based social media account. And honestly, that's where 90% of my clients have come from. So it's definitely something that I would have invested in from the get go.
I think that's great advice. And now you do some, correct me if I'm wrong, you do some social media strategy for your team as well, yes?
Yes, my position is a little unique. I don't do as much transaction heavy business because, in addition to being a real estate broker, I am also my team's listing manager and social media manager. So I do manage our social media and the social media for a luxury community that we have.
Ooh, cool. Yes. Is that the one you did this really fun video about what houses the Disney princesses would live in? Is that your luxury neighborhood?
Yes,
Oh
it's the
my
luxury
gosh.
community.
Everybody should go to Alicia's TikTok and guess which princesses live in which houses because that was really fun for me. And I was like right sometimes, but then I was like also like wrong. But then like, oh yes, I see why this would be Snow White and not Belle. Duh.
There's no right or wrong answer with that. It's whichever one resonates with you. Because I did also post that on Instagram stories just to kind of like poll people and see what they came up with. And I got all kinds of different answers that were very different than what I initially thought. But it was like, oh yeah, I can totally see that.
I think that's fun. That's a really cool way to interact with people. Okay, since this is you are so strong in social media, do you have like a couple of like tips you would share with real estate agents who are maybe struggling or want to do more?
Oh, absolutely. Social media is a really, really great way to connect with your audience. The way I always tell people when we're talking about how to post on social media and what to post on social media and why it's important is that people want to do business with people that they like. So you have to give them a reason to like you. So you can go on social media and you can post what we affectionately call house porn, which is just you showing all of these pretty houses. But there's nothing for people to really connect to and make them think, yep, that's the real estate agent that I want to work with. So I definitely encourage putting your face on camera, talking to your audience, giving them a little bit of your personality. Kind of like, I share a little bit of that Disney side of me through that because that is something that I really enjoy. And don't even just share real estate focused things. Also share things in your community, places that you like to go eat and get coffee, or even, local outdoor activities. Like I do videos where I take my dog Lola on a hike to one of our local greenways or our parks just to share things about the community that people can resonate with and they can be like, oh yeah, I like to do that too. You have to give people a reason to actually connect with you through social media because that's the whole purpose of having these apps is to build an audience and build a community and really communicate with people.
I think that's said perfectly because I think people probably just go like, "Ah, I should post more." But like let's like run it back to like Facebook, right? We're going old school. Right? When you post your big life moments
Mhm.
on Facebook, like if that's the minimum you do and say you share wedding pictures or like I don't know, family holiday pictures and you're like 76-year-old Aunt Linda, posts in the comments. This is not my story, but posts in the comments like, oh, like, love you so much. Beautiful smile. You're like, oh, yeah, Aunt Linda pays attention. And it's
Yeah.
like the same thing. There are people out there that are paying attention. They want to know what you're doing, not just like what your business is. And so I think that's where you get so much value out of showing a video of you taking your dog hiking. I'm like, oh, she is the millennial agent because she has a dog and she goes hiking. Um, all millennials either like have a dog or wish they had a dog, except for me. I like to see other people's dogs.
Yeah, there are kids at this point for most
Yeah.
of us. I think really from like a technical perspective, when I hear people that are hesitant to start posting on social media, it's a lot of like, well, I don't know what I would say, or I'm not good on camera. So what I always like to tell people is take your time. You're editing a video, you're not absolutely live. So you can go back and you can edit it out and be like, okay, you know what? I probably shouldn't have said that. I'm going to delete this part. You can re-record things. It's completely up to you. It is a lot easier when you're doing like long form talking videos. I like to tell people do short clips. Think of one sentence or two sentences that you want to say, think them out in your head, and then say them. And then do it again. And then do it again. And then you've got a 2-minute video of you talking about something and you sound super confident and like you know exactly what you're talking about.
Totally. Yeah. Because we're so used to everything being clipped together anyway. I had said this recently. Like, I know stories are a little bit different, right? Because stories, it's like 30 seconds long and it's continuous. But on a reel or a TikTok, we're used to seeing like cut, 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 like one sentence at a time, like you said. So nobody's going to think anything of it.
No, and they tend to, for whatever reason, when you're doing those shorter clips, it holds people's attention easier because we are a society of very short attention spans.
And then that's the other thing. I think with short attention spans, it also doesn't have to be long. Like shorter is probably better in a lot of cases.
Yeah, there are definitely some subjects that I feel like doing the longer videos and kind of talking it through and explaining it does well. And then there's other videos that it just needs to be a 10-second video with text on a screen for people to read because then they're just going to scroll on about their day.
Yeah. Do you like those posts? Sometimes I go back and forth on whether I like those.
It depends. From a creator standpoint, when I'm making them, I do like that sometimes I don't have time or feel like I want to put on enough makeup to feel like I look camera presentable to make a long video. So I can just pull B-roll footage from something in the past and add some educational text that's going to give some value to whoever's watching it. And then I can go on about my day. So it's definitely a lazy way to post sometimes, but it can be effective.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like as when I post stuff, doing that, I'm like, "Ugh, I didn't have to put my face on a camera today. Yes. But sometimes as the scroller, when I come across stuff like that, I'm like, I have to read.
Yeah. It has to be phrased correctly, I think. There are some that, when it's too much text on the screen at one time, I'm just like, oh, I'm not going to read all that. I'm just going to keep scrolling. But I think the people that do it really, really well manage to time the text out and they make sure they use that really great hook at first that you're like, oh, I'm going to stop scrolling for a second and see what this is about. So it's a lazy way to post, but it's not necessarily an easy way to effectively post. There's people that are great at it, and then there's people that aren't.
For sure. Yeah, that's well said. For your social media posting, do you try to post every day? Is it a reel and a story? What are your goals for posting?
I will say that my goals and my reality don't always match up. Um, this is real estate. Our days are chaotic at best. Um, Typically, I try to post at least one video on TikTok every day, Monday through Friday. I usually avoid posting on the weekends One, because there is less of an audience that's sitting down scrolling typically. And two, because on the weekends, there is no telling whether or not I'm going to have time to sit down, since if I'm showing houses, I'm going to be driving around all day. Or it might be the one miraculous day that I have to do absolutely nothing and I'm not going to want to get up and put makeup on and record some videos. Um, so I shoot from Monday through Friday to post on TikTok. I try to get better about stories, but I'm not always great about remembering that I need to post something on stories for TikTok. For Instagram, I try to post roughly 3 times a week on there, just because with the algorithm changes, as of now, it is constantly changing. It doesn't seem to help to post constantly every single day as much as it does on TikTok. And then I share a lot of things on the stories on Instagram more so, especially with our neighborhoods and with our real estate team, and then some of the local accounts. Anything that I think might be useful for the people that follow me there.
That's great. I think it's so nice for you to say, like, I have goals and then there's what actually happens. Because when you hear someone be like, well, you have to do it every day, you're like, well, do you do it every day? And they're like, yes. You're like, okay. Um, it's like, no, I strive to do it every day. Are you planning things out in advance? Do you batch content? Is it just off the cuff? How do you organize it?
All of the above.
Okay, yeah, totally.
There are some things that I know that I want to plan ahead for. If I'm going to be touring a home, if I'm going to be going out and showing homes to a client, and that's a really good opportunity to grab some content, actually showing what a real estate agent does. And then there are times that, a lot of my videos where I'm just sitting in my car talking to my phone, it'll be because something happened that day that prompted this conversation that I think other people might find useful, or when there's things that come up in the news, or when I get a comment from somebody that I'm like, oh, that's a really good subject to talk about. So a lot of those tend to be more off the cuff, and not super planned out. And then a lot of things that I try to plan out don't always go the way I plan them out. And sometimes I try to plan things out for the future, and then by the time I get around to it, it's just not topical anymore. So it's not really worth doing. Um, so it's a little bit of everything. You definitely have to be flexible when it comes to posting on social media, especially when it comes to TikTok, because it is so organic. And I feel like a lot of the content that does so well doesn't have to be that really aesthetic curated look. That's for Instagram. For TikTok, you can be a little unhinged, you can be a little less formal, and you can be casual and really let your personality out more.
Totally. And do you like recommend, because you do hear people say like, oh, they're completely different platforms. You shouldn't cross post. But how do you feel about for someone starting out just cross posting everything everywhere?
I say cross post. There's going to be different audiences for both platforms, and there are some things that I cross post and some things I don't. Instagram, I do see as a much more aesthetic and curated world. So that's where I'm posting my pretty little house tours. That's where I'm posting more like aesthetic looking videos of myself walking around a house and things like that. Whereas on TikTok, I am posting more videos of me just talking to the camera and having a conversation with my followers and my audience and providing them value that way. But there's sometimes that both of those can cross over and you can have a piece of content that fits both platforms. And if it does, absolutely cross post. You're going to find different audiences on both platforms. And so if you completely refuse to cross post and you just don't think it has any value to it, you could be missing out on a whole bunch of people being able to see your content.
I love that answer because I think, people get really nitty gritty about anything they're passionate about. And I have so much respect for that. But I also think some people maybe just like creating a lot of work, you know? And I'm all about working smarter, not harder. So like yes, something might pop off on TikTok that flops on Instagram, but you didn't
Mhm.
know until you put it in both places.
Yeah. You don't know if you don't try.
Totally. Alicia, is there anything that has surprised you about your real estate journey?
Oh, so many things. Um, just getting into real estate to begin with, I definitely had no idea what it took to actually get started. Um, you have people that tell you, yeah, you should do real estate. You're going to be great at it. You have people that are real estate agents that are telling you, yeah, go to this real estate school, get your degree, and then you can come join my firm. But they don't tell you what you actually have to do to join firms. They don't tell you that some firms are going to be better for you than other firms, that all firms have different things to offer you. They definitely don't tell you about how much you will actually have to spend up front to get licensed, to join a real estate firm, possibly to join an MLS system, or, in an area like mine where your MLS system is tied to the Realtor Association, to also join that association. So that can be a little surprising. It definitely was for me. I was not prepared for the price tag coming out with my little real estate license to actually join a firm. And then once I joined it, I realized that going through that course taught me basically how not to get sued as a real estate agent, but it did not teach me how to actually be a real estate agent. So that was surprising for me because once I started going through it and I was like, oh, I actually don't know where to find clients. I don't know how to market myself to clients. I don't know what I'm allowed to say to clients and what I'm not allowed to say to clients. I don't know what to do once I get these clients and I'm taking them through these houses and they want to put in an offer, because they teach you the basics and some of the mechanics that go behind it, but there's so much that has to be learned hands on. And if you don't have a great mentorship program or coaching program behind you, it can be really difficult to get started because you're just kind of floating out in the middle of the sea with no lifeboat around you. That's definitely how I felt like my first year went. Like I said, when I joined my team, it made a world of difference because I was like, oh, that's how I do this. That makes so much more sense now because I had somebody who was, beside me pretty much every step of the way telling me, like, this is what you're going to do, A, B, C, D, E. And it opened up a whole new world for me. I was like, okay, I can do this. I actually can do this. And I'm actually good at it. So that was definitely surprising. Before that, I probably would have said that you could learn anything from a book or a class or a video. And then I became a real estate agent and realized that there are some things you are only going to learn by first world experience.
Well, and and it really comes full circle with all the advice, you're giving, and it is a relationships business, so it kind of makes sense that to be successful at it, like you have to create relationships with other agents as well and have that mentorship.
Yeah, and that's something that the collaboration between agents, it's actually something that the real estate firm that I'm with, it's one of their kind of pillars that they lean on is collaboration without ego. So we
Mm.
really put an emphasis on agents working together because when we work together, we're making all agents better, which is better for sellers. It's better for buyers. It's better for us when we know that the agent on the other side does know what they're doing. They've done this before, or they have somebody that can teach them how to do it. And we're not going to end up in situations where we don't know what's going on the listing side. They don't know what's going on the buyer side. There's no communication. And that just makes for kind of a messy transaction. Um, so I definitely feel like it's so important to connect with other agents, to have those great working relationships, because it can very much feel like a dog eat dog world in real estate, and you're out for your own self trying to get all your clients and keep all your clients. But if you're not working with other agents, or you're not cooperating with them and communicating with them, it's only going to make your job harder.
Oh, yeah. So your group does some other interesting things. Um, for your clients, you have this Compass concierge service. Can you explain what that is?
So Compass Concierge is an internal program that we have. If you've ever heard of something like Curbio, it is a program very similar to that. If you're trying to sell your home or you're trying to list your home and it needs repairs, it needs to have the carpet replaced, it needs to have fresh paint, anything that you know is going to end up coming up in an inspection report or something that could be a turnoff to buyers that would make your home show better and sell quicker, but you don't necessarily have the capital upfront to go ahead and spend $5,000, $10,000 on those repairs. We have the Compass Concierge program that you can utilize to basically front those costs for you, and then you pay the money back when you close on the home. There are fees and things that are associated with it, but it's a really, really great tool for somebody who wants to put their home in the best showing condition possible before they put it on the market, to avoid having to deal with a lot of negotiating repairs and things like that down the line, and to just get their home sold quicker and for a higher value.
Right. I think it's so smart that your group offers something like that. It's like really full service.
It's a great resource for us to have because it happens all the time when we have clients and we go to walk through their homes to do a listing presentation. And there's definitely things that we're going to notice that maybe they didn't notice or they didn't think was going to be a big deal, but that we can point out, buyers are going to ask for this more than likely. It's going to photograph better if we repaint these walls and we have a nice neutral color palette through here. If we know that this certain repair, a broken stair railing or something like that is going to come up on an inspection report, something that for some certain loan types may have to be repaired, it's just going to help you out to take care of it before it even goes on the market so that it's not a headache later on down the line. And it's great for us to have that tool so that we can tell people about that, because it can be really scary when you're in a listing presentation with a client and you're telling them, yeah, you really need to do about $5,000 worth of repairs before we list your home. And they're going, well, I don't have $5,000 to do that. So it's something great that we can present as an option if they want to explore that.
Very cool. And Alicia, you're in Raleigh. And I know you're very, out and about in your community. So could you tell us like what is your favorite thing about selling in your area?
There is so much that I love about just being in Raleigh in general. Um, Working in real estate in this area the last few years has been really exciting because there is so much change happening. There's so much development around the area. We're attracting so many new people that have suddenly discovered how awesome it is to live here. So we're constantly expanding. We're constantly getting these new perspectives and new ideas and new industries that are bringing a lot of really great jobs to the area. And this is just a really cool place to live, in my opinion. I did grow up just outside of Raleigh, so I may be slightly biased, but I could not imagine living anywhere else at this point. And I have lived a few other places.
That's so wonderful. And do you have any goals for this year that you'd like to share with us?
Oh, always goals. I am aiming to close another 7 to 8 transactions this year. Um, the really important thing for me, and we actually have talked about this with my team as a team, is what our goals even mean to us, because all real estate agents will break down and say, oh, we want to do this number of transactions because we want to be able to make this much money. But we really try to get down to like, why do we even want to make that much money? Why is it so important to do that? So for me, getting the number of transactions that I want to, on top of making more connections and helping more clients out from a personal standpoint. And this is something that I have shared a little bit about on my social media. My real estate business in general does support the IVF journey that my husband and I have been on. So, obviously, one of my big goals for this year is to be able to pay for some of the treatments that we need so that we can continue that journey and hopefully start our family. A less slightly emotional goal. I've been talking with my mom and my sister for ever now about doing a really big family trip to Disney World, because that's obviously something that I really, really love. My mom managed to take us one time when we were a little bit younger. My sister and I were teenagers. My little brother was a toddler at the time, so he barely remembers it. And she saved for the longest time as a single mom to be able to do that for us. And she, my sister, and my brother have not been able to go back since then. It has been a big thing for me and my husband. So we've done quite a few trips to Disney World. And it's something that I want to share with my family now, especially as our family has grown and I have nieces and nephews. I have a 6-year-old niece that we are absolutely helping her become a future Disney adult. She loves all the movies, loves all the songs. All of her clothes pretty much have Mickey or Minnie Mouse on them. So taking them to Disney World would be so special. So that's something that I have made a goal since I started in real estate to be able to save up and eventually pay to be able to take the entire family for a nice week-long vacation to explore as much of Disney World as we can. There's about 15 of us at this point with my family, so that would not be a small undertaking, but it's a big goal that I have had for a while.
I think it's a beautiful goal and such a clear vision. And I think it's great that not only you, but your entire group is kind of talking about your why. Like, why do we even do this? Like, why is it important? And I think that's like a great takeaway for, anybody listening or watching to think about like, well, why do I want to hit my goals? Why do I want to make more money? And hopefully they have such a clear and beautiful goal like yours.
Yeah, I think everyone, if you sat down and thought about it and went back, why do I want to make so much money? What is it going to do for me? What can I do if I have that money available to me? How's it going to change my life? Everyone has that why that's at the back of their mind that is pushing them and keeping them going because, if you didn't really have a goal like that, I think if it was just monetarily, most of us would probably get burnt out a lot easier or give up or just kind of move on to the next thing because having that emotional push is just so much more powerful.
I agree. Oh, I think that's a good place to wrap it up. Alicia, thank you so much for sitting down with me today and taking the time. Would you like to direct people where they can find you, how they can work with you?
Absolutely. So you can obviously find me on social media. My TikTok handle is Alicia underscore TMREA, just the Millennial Real Estate Agent. And on Instagram, it is at the Millennial Real Estate Agent. You can also find me at AliciaArritt.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alicia.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Closing Table podcast brought to you by WindowStill. I'm Kat Schooler. Please make sure you are following and subscribe to this podcast either on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. And if you're enjoying this podcast, you can leave us up to a 5-star review. Reviewing and rating this podcast really helps us find more amazing listeners like you. Thank you all so much, and we will see you next time.